So I left the UK 2 years ago, and since then my life has completely transformed. I have more freedom, more money, better weather, and overall a much richer life. So if you're ready to leave the UK as well, you're ready to leave the taxes, the terrible weather, the crime, and the overall declining society, then in this video I'm going to tell you exactly how to do that in the most detailed way that you'll find on any video on YouTube. Now it might seem as simple as simply packing your bags, booking a flight, and going to another country, but it is absolutely not. And there are many things that most people fail to consider when it comes to properly become a non-resident in the UK for tax purposes, properly dealing with your potential existing companies in the UK, properly dealing with a potential UK exit tax, and many other factors that you need to do properly, because if you don't, the UK might still tax you even if you don't think you still live there. My name is Thomas, and over the past few years I have built myself a life of freedom around the world. And on this channel I want to help you do the same, because I think most people live boring and uninspiring lives, and I don't want you to be one of them. By the way, this video is not at all official tax advice or anything like that. I am not an accountant, I am not a tax advisor. These are just the opinions of some guy on the internet based on his personal experience and his research. But if you want to go through this, make sure to speak to your professional, and later on in the video I'll give you some contacts for that as well. First of all, why did I leave the UK? Well, to me the UK used to be the most desirable place to be in Europe. Specifically London, it was an exciting city. It felt like the place to be kind of way, but over the past few years everything has simply been in decline. The weather has always been terrible. I've always wanted to live in a place where it's always sunny. That is definitely not the UK. The sort of attitudes and the culture of the people is just about conforming to society and just avoiding risks at all costs. And that was just never me. The economy has been going to complete toilet. The crime has been increasing. And when you have these governments who don't seem to have the right incentives, who don't seem to want to fix these problems, they're just focused on all these weird agendas and like not hurting anyone's feelings, allowing mass illegal immigration, all these kind of things. It was simply no longer the kind of society where I wanted to live. And on top of all that, I had the pleasure of paying 40 to 45% tax for all of these problems. And so I just came to the conclusion that this is not a great deal anymore. So I left and I moved myself to Dubai in the UAE specifically. Why did I go to the UAE? Well, UAE essentially fixed all of the problems that I had with the UK. It had great weather for most of the year. The summer's a bit too hot, but in the summer I just go to other places. It has 0% income tax and 0% corporate tax if you make less than $816,000 a year. If you make more than that, then it is 9% corporate tax, but it's still like the lowest corporate tax you'll get pretty much anywhere. It is extremely safe, no crime at all, because it is a kind of society that does not tolerate crime. People might complain about this, but if you're the type of person where you're gonna go out and commit crimes, you're not gonna follow the rules, then the UAE is absolutely not your place. But for the 98% of people who are gonna follow the rules, that is much better, because it doesn't allow the 2% of people to ruin the society for everyone else. It seems like every successful, growth-minded person is moving to Dubai right now, which is also making it an amazing hub for networking for entrepreneurial people such as myself. If you're yourself looking to move to Dubai specifically, by the way, and you want someone's help to go through this entire process from exiting the UK to becoming a UAE resident and forming your company in the UAE, then I can hook you up with my business partners down below. They offer a free 45-minute consultation where they can walk you through this entire process, tell you exactly what this all will entail for your specific situation, and then if you want to use their services, they will do all of this for you for a very, very reasonable fee. So that call booking link will be down below in the description if you're interested in that. Now let's go over the high-level process of what it takes to become a non-resident in the UK. Now the first part of the process should actually not be exiting the UK, but it should be deciding where you're going to go next. Why is that? Well, once you exit the UK, once you go through the process of becoming non-resident, you're going to have some other place to go to, right? Which means you're going to have a residence permit there. You're going to have everything set up in your new place so you can make this exit process as smooth as possible. If you haven't decided yet, the way I would do this is simply imagine what would be the ideal theoretical city or country if you could essentially build your ideal dream city from scratch. Think about all the factors that it would have in terms of weather, in terms of the vibe and everything, and then look at the real places in the world and see which one of those real places aligns mostly with these theoretical ideal cities. This is the exercise that I did. I had this freaking Excel sheet where I was just like comparing different places with all the different criteria, and that is how I ended up in Dubai for me personally, but it might not be for you, so you want to choose carefully where you're going to go. Now, how do you become a UK non-resident? Well, luckily in the case of the UK, you can go to this website, on the government website that I'm going to leave the link to down below in the description. Essentially, these are called the statutory residence test, and this is what it looks like. Essentially, you have these several tests that you need to go through that are related to how long you spend in the UK, what sort of ties you have to the UK and things like this. You have automatic overseas tests, which means that if you pass any of these tests, you're automatically a non-UK resident. Then you have automatic UK test, which is if you didn't pass any of the automatic overseas tests, but you pass one of the automatic UK tests, then you're automatically a UK resident, no other questions asked. And then you have the sufficient ties test, where if you don't pass any of these tests, then it will look at in more detail about what specific ties you have and like the number of ties you have and things like this. You can go through this and look at it on your own. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but for example, we can look at this automatic overseas test, which says you'll be a non-UK resident for the tax year if you are a resident in the UK for one or more of the previous 3 tax years and you spend fewer than 16 days in the UK in the year. The second automatic overseas test, you'll be a non-UK resident if you were a resident in the UK for none of the previous 3 tax years and you spend fewer than 46 days in the UK in the tax year. And then you have the third automatic overseas test. You look at these tests. So essentially you want to consider how many days in the year will you want to spend in the UK after you become a UK non-resident. For me, this is 0 because I have no desire to ever spend any days in the UK. But if you're perhaps from the UK, you have family in the UK, chances are you'll want to still spend some time there. So you want to be very careful about how many days you still spend there. You want to look at these tests to determine for your case, how many days would you still be able to spend there. For example, you have a first automatic UK test that says you'll be a UK resident for the tax year if you spend more than 183 days in the UK. So if you spend more than half the year, you'll automatically be a UK resident. Now going through these tests, in most cases, if you spend less than 91 days, you should be fine. You shouldn't become a UK resident. But again, you want to look through those tests in detail to look at exactly how many days you can spend for your situation. And another important part about becoming a UK non-resident is what they call the 5-year rule. So essentially, if you leave the UK, but you come back to the UK, so you become a UK resident again within 5 years from the year when you left, then any gains, so any capital gains that you realize during those 5 years will be taxed in the UK. So let's say you leave the UK, you sell your company and you're resident in, for example, the UAE, where that should be taxed at 0%. But if you then return to the UK on the 4th year after you left, then the UK is going to tax all of those gains that you accrued during those 5 years. So it's very, very important that you make this decision to leave for at least 5 years. Otherwise, the UK is still going to come back to you and tax all of the gains that you had during those 5 years. I will again leave the link below to the specifics on this 5-year rule. There are some conditions on when this rule applies, and when it doesn't apply, it doesn't always apply. You can look at the specific in the link down below in the description. The last important part about becoming UK non-resident is what they call the split year treatment. So by default, in the UK, you'll either be a tax resident for the entire tax year or none of the tax year. And the tax years run from April to April. I don't know why they have it like this, but they just do. But let's say you leave midway through the tax year, you can apply for what is called split year treatment. This is what I used myself when I left the UK in the month of January. This will mean that you will be deemed a UK non-resident on the specific day when you leave the UK, not just at the end of the tax year. So if you're leaving midway through the year, this is definitely something that you should do because it allows you to become a non-resident instantly right when you leave. Again, for the details, I will leave them down below in the description. Now, the next thing to consider is a potential UK exit tax. So let's say you're an entrepreneur and you have companies in the UK. What will happen when you become a UK non-resident is that those companies will essentially be migrating out of the UK. So these will be like what's called migrating companies. And on that moment, when these companies sort of figuratively cross the UK border into your new country of residence, the UK will essentially deem that you have sold those companies at their fair market value, and they are going to tax capital gains on those gains. Now, there's a lot of specifics for this, and there's a lot of exemptions and things like this that you want to look at again for the details down below in the description. But the most important, perhaps, caveat to this is that it is possible, if you are, let's say, the sole operator of this company, to claim that the value of your company is 0 based on the fact that the company could not run without you because you are the sole operator of this company. I know people who have gone through this, and you need to work with a proper accountant to do this properly, of course. But in the UK, it seems like, and again, this is not official tax advice, but it seems like it is possible in many cases to claim that the value of your companies is 0, which would not actually trigger any kind of exit charge. But this is something that you will need to notify the government of, everything like that, work with a professional. My business partners will also give you all the contacts you need that will be able to do all of this for you properly if you decide to use their services. Now, the last thing to consider is what is going to happen to your existing UK companies. Now, contrary to popular belief, just because a company is registered in the UK doesn't mean that it's always going to be resident in the UK. So you could technically leave the UK yourself with your company. So your UK registered companies would now become UAE or Singapore or whatever, the resident company. So they are now managed and controlled from this other country, which means that they would become tax resident in this new country that you're moving to. So you could technically simply keep running these existing companies from your country of residence. Or there is another case where, let's say you own these companies, but you have an operator who is the actual person who manages and controls these companies, who makes all the decisions for these companies, but they still live in the UK and they keep managing the companies from the UK. In that case, you could simply leave these companies operating in the UK just as normal, even if you as the owner don't live there anymore. But usually for the most simple accounting and things like this, it would be most advisable to simply dissolve your UK companies after you become UK non-resident and then create a new company in the UAE or wherever. If you're going to the UAE, you're sort of going to have to form a new company anyway, because most of the time that is how you're going to give yourself a visa. So most of the time it simply makes most sense to simply dissolve your UK companies and just make a new company in the UAE to replace those. That is exactly what almost everyone that I know that has moved to the UAE has done. Now you might ask yourself, why not just dissolve the companies while you're still a UK resident so that you can avoid this potential exit tax? Well, the problem there becomes is that if you dissolve your UK companies when you're still a UK resident, now all of the gains and all of the profits of your UK companies will be taxed on you as personal income or capital gains, depending on sort of the situation. And chances are that this tax rate is going to be much higher than the potential exit tax that you might have to pay when you live in the UK. Again, specifics will depend on your specific situations, but usually this is how it would be done. So you would leave the UK first and then dissolve the companies and form the new one in the UAE or wherever you're going. So this is the high level process of what it takes to become a UK non-resident. Again, all the resources will be down below, and if you want to book that call, that link will still be down below in the description as well. Again, this is just a high level overview and I'm trying to talk about this in the general case. The specifics will depend on your situation. With that said, if you want to know why everyone is leaving the UK, what are the specific reasons why the UK is such a terrible country right now for any entrepreneurs, any growth-minded people, I made this video right here where I go through all these reasons. So you can watch that video if you're not yet convinced that you should leave the UK. And then after that, if you're convinced, then you can come back to this video and start going through the process. So go watch that video next. I'll see you in the next one.